All right, let's take a look at the Week 20 practice test. And I'm hoping that you'll have looked at this by the time you get to class on Monday so we can go directly to questions and not just go to the problems themselves. All right, problem number 1. They ask you to create 2 right triangles using A and B and another using B and C. So here are our right triangles. Here is the AB right triangle. Here is the BC right triangle. My lines aren't quite as pretty as their lines. And they ask you to find the slope using the ratio. So remember, ratio is always the change slope, change in y over change in x. Write this down somewhere on your paper. That's the Greek letter delta, and mathematicians use the Greek letter delta to indicate change. So the change for triangle, right triangle with AB, it's a change of 4 to 2. 4 to 2. That's this one, 4 to 2. Triangle B to C is a change of 8 to 4. Notice both those changes end up equaling 2. Their second question is, if you did another triangle and you went all the way from A to C, what would you expect to get and why? You'd expect to get 2. The slope does not change. The slope anywhere along the line, the slope does not change. If you went to a little part of the slope of this line, let's say you went right here, that little tiny piece, that's 2 to 1, change of 2. When you do the A to C is going to take you all the way up there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. And all the way over there. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. And 12 to 6 is going to be a slope of 2. So it doesn't matter where you are on the line. The slope is always the same. Here we go. They gave you some comparison problems. So how does Dave's construction company do using its sand, its concrete, and its mulch? Which does he use the most of each day? The correct answer is sand. How do we know that? Well, we can take a look at the line here. Remember, since it's a straight line, we know that he's using the same amount. The daily amount doesn't change. The amount used in day 1 is the same as day 2, day 3, day 4. So the change is the change in y, 0 to 1200, over the change in x, 0 to 8. When you simplify 1200 to 8, let's simplify it in steps. 8 goes into 12 4 times. So 1200, 8 doesn't go into 12 4 times. Let's try that again. 12 and 8 simplifies to 3 over 2. So we have 300 over 2. 8 goes into 12. 150 times. That's the slope. The daily use of sand is 150. If you want to double check that, if you did 150 times 8, you would see 8 times 0, 8 times 5 is 40, 8 times 1 is 8, 4 makes 12. There's our 1200. So 150 pounds, because it's in pounds, per day. That's the rate that we're using sand. How about the rate that we're using concrete? Okay, so we're using concrete. Here's a change of 1. Here's a change of 125. Here's a change of 1. Between 3 and 4, a change of 1. Between here, a change of 125. So concrete is being used at 125 pounds per day. And the mulch, well, the mulch is 1,100 minus 100D. That's 100 per day. Number of days, D. Total pounds, P. So we know that mulch is changing at a rate of 100 pounds per day. Now we can answer the questions. What material does he use most of? Sand. He's using sand the fastest because the sand was 150 pounds per day as opposed to 125 or 100. What material, gotta scroll a little bit, what material will Dave have the most of after 8 days? He started out with 1,375. If he decreases that at 125 per day, he will still have more concrete left, because notice at the end of 8 days, this runs all the way to 0. Let's take a look here. Let's take a look at the mulch. And you can see why different ways of showing this work the best. For this particular question, man, the best would be this graph like sand, because it would show you the exact amount left after 8 days. Over here, if he has 1,100 pounds and you take away 100 pounds a day for 8 days, you have 1,100 pounds. Take away 800 pounds, you have 300 pounds left. Over here, you're taking away 125 pounds a day. So if you did 125 times 8 days, 8 times 5, 40, 8 times 2 is 16, and 4 makes 20, 8 times 1 is 8, and 2 makes 10. You're going to take 1,000 pounds away from 1,375. So you have 1,375, take away 1,000 pounds. He will have 375 pounds left after 8 days. All right, so review that. If you need to watch that part of the video again, go ahead and do that. You can certainly bring those questions to class. You're going to see something like this on the test, a comparison problem where you're asked, basically what you're asked to do is interpret each form of the information, whether it's a graph like the sand, or a table like the concrete, or a formula like the mulch. Number 3, direct variation. See, this is a busy week. We've got 3 new things. But you're going to find direct variation. If you looked at this and you said to yourself, I have no idea what this means. This is one of the things, if you look at the words they use, direct variation. It varies directly. So they're telling you wheel B spins in a way that varies directly with how wheel A spins, which means when you spin A, it controls B. Spin A controls B. Spin A 4 times, it controls B. B goes around 10 times. Spin it 8 times, B goes around 20 times. Oh, look, you doubled 4, you doubled B. Spin it 12 times, 4 times 3 makes 12, 10 times 3 makes 30. Here's what we know. We know that this has a variation of every change in 2 here gives us a change in 5. Change this by 2, get a change of 5. Change this by 2, get a change of 5. Change this by 2, get a change of 5. When they tell you that B varies directly with A, what they're telling you is that A is what we call the independent and if we were giving them x's and y's, that would be the x, as opposed to b, which is the dependent. How much b spins depends on how much a spins. B would be the y. So you're going to take your brain back to slope, which was the change in y divided by the change in x, and constant of variation is the same as, I don't want to do that down below because it looks like I'm dividing something. Constant of variation is the same as slope. These all tie together. They might look different, but they all tie together. So when you see constant of variation, just think slope. All you have to do is identify which is the x and which is the y. The y will always be the dependent, the one that varies directly with, and the x will always be the independent. So if the amount of plant growth, if they said the amount the plant grows varies directly with the amount of water, then the growth of the plant would be the y, because it depends on the amount of water you're given. Write an equation. We're on to part B now. Write an equation you could use to find the time B spins compared to A. Well, B spins the constant of variation times A. So if we plug in from our table, if we go back to our table and we plug in a B value, let's just take the first one, 10 equals 5/2 times 4. Think of it as 4 over 1. So you'd end up with 10 equals 5 times 4 over 2 times 1, or 20 over 2. Yep, that equals 10. Same thing would happen if you picked a different spot on the table. Let's take the 6 and the 15. 15 equals 5/2 times 6. Well, that means 15 equals 5 times 6 over 2 times 1. Remember, in each of those cases, I went ahead to this and just said, oh, I'm going to think of that as over 1, so I'm multiplying fraction times fraction. And that is 30 over 2, and yes, that's 15. So our equation will always be the dependent, which is y, equals the constant of variation times whatever the independent was. All right, we'll discuss that more, don't worry. But again, this is one of those types of problems where you can look at it, you can say to yourself, man, I have no idea at all what that means. But if you suspend that, if you can get yourself away from that and instead look at it and think back to how these different sections have gone, usually when a new idea is introduced, if there are 2 or 3 problems, they all tie together somehow. These all tie together with the idea of slope. If you go back, let me just take a trip back here. 20.1a, linear equations, slope. 20.2a, linear functions. Again, dealing with slope. Slope tells you how much per day. 20.3, direct variation. Again, ties into the idea of slope. All right, on to 19. So these are probably 2 that you understood better. You have to be careful how you read it. So they wanted to draw a straight line through A that is not a function. So anytime you want not a function, just fail the vertical line test. If you want a function, don't fail the vertical line test. This is not a function because if you take this value of x it has all those values of y. This one, if you did this as a table, here's what you'd be saying. Here's x, here's y. Let's take this point right there. All right, let me get a different color out. So take that point right there. For that point, x is -2, y is +2. -2, +2. The first one I drew, x is -2 and y is 0. If I put a point on the line right there, x is -2, y is -1, 2, 3, -4. You can see I have the same x every time, but I keep getting different y's. That's not a function. The second one also asks for an is not a function, and they say answers will vary. Here's what you have for is not a function. Take any x value, 5, give it a y. Now take the very same x value, 5, give it a different y. If you have two x's, let me say it differently. If you have the same number in the x column twice, and when you look at the y's, they're different y's, now you're saying, boy, you know what? I don't know what y is going to be when I pick x. If it's a function, you will always know what y is because there's only one possible y. When it's not a function, heck, you could pick an x, pick the x you know. The y is just like rolling the dice. You have no idea what the y is going to be. All right, number 6. So the amount the catering company charges varies directly with the number of people attending. So varies directly tells us that we are going to have a line, straight line, that goes through the origin. They give us a second fact. They tell us that 15 people cost $270. So 15 people, $270. 15 people, $270. All right, graph the line, done. What's the slope of the line? Well, the change in the y went from 0 right up there to 270. The change in the x went from 0 right out here to 15. So if we take 270 and we divide by 15, 15 goes into 27 one time, 15, 1, 2, bring down the 0. 15 goes into 128 times. That gives us our slope. So this slope of 18 came from doing 270 over 15. Significance? It means each person costs $18. And since it varies directly, it means you add another person, it costs another $18. You add another person, it costs $18. Add 2 more people, it costs 18 times 2, $36. How much would it cost to cater an event with this company, cater an event with 25 people? It would be the number of people times $18, because every person costs $18, and that would be $450. All right. Inequalities. We're coming to the last time we're doing inequalities here. These two, you probably did really well on these two. Again, not a negative coefficient, so the sign's not going to change direction. It starts out as greater than. It ends up as greater than. We go ahead. Let's just put this in there really quickly for old time's sake. Let's add 72 to get rid of that. So we're going to add 72. This gives us 0 pairs, 8x left over, greater than. When you combine 48 and 72, one of them's negative, one of them's positive, so they cancel out. They leave 24. Divide by 8 in both places. Big 1, x greater than 3. Open circle because 3 cannot be part of the answer. Number 8, Sarah earns $20 a week doing household chores and $12 per hour babysitting. So here's a breakdown of what Sarah earns. She makes $20 a week. That's the constant amount. That does not change. Doesn't matter what Sarah does. She gets $20 a week, as long as she does the chores. But if she does the chores fast or slow, $20 a week. Now, $12 an hour is what she gets to babysit. That does change. If she has to spend 5 hours babysitting, she makes more money than if she spends 3 hours. Not like the chores. If it took her 5 hours to do her chores, she gets paid the same amount as if it took 3 hours to do the chores. That's the difference between a constant amount and a variable amount. So you'd go through, you'd take away the 20 from each side, you divide what's left by the 12, and you get down to Sarah needs to babysit more than 6 2/3 hours each week if she's going to make her goal. All right, ladies and gentlemen, please come into class with your questions on this one. We want to focus in on those questions, especially on the new material. So watch the video, bring the questions on Monday. I will see you then.